Hi, my name is Stewart Lynch, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can add a widget extension to a UI-based app that was built with Xcode 10 and still has a deployment target of 12.1. Users updating to iOS 14 will be able to take advantage of the widget, while you can still support users with iOS 13 or earlier. It will look great in light and dark mode. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. Please download the starter project from the link in the notes below. This is a completed app with a deployment target of 12.1 and is built using Storyboards and UIKit. I used to travel a lot and always needed just a few tidbits of information readily available to me. For example, I might rent a car and want to make sure I know the license plate number and the make and model. Often, I check into rooms and promptly forget my room number, so let's create one for that. Sometimes the hotel has a pool that requires a pool code. And often, I want quick access to the phone number of my client contact. There are lots of things that I just need quick access to, so I built this app that lays out the information in a collection view on my app's main screen. If I open one of these items, I can tap the Make Primary button, and this will change the color of the item in the collection view. This is a visual clue to one item that is the most important to me at this moment, so I can see that information right away. Now, iOS 14 has introduced the concept of widgets, where you can add items to your home screen. These widgets come in 3 different sizes and can either pull your app at regular intervals to retrieve information, or you can design the app to push the information directly when things change. What I'm going to do today is show you how you can do the latter. Each time I set a different primary item, I want that item to change the widget on my home screen. We'll design the small and medium widgets, but you'll be able to see that adding a large version would be easy, so you can do that on your own. Before we start, make sure you run the app and add some remembered items of your own. The app is quite simple. It is, as I mentioned, a UIKit app built using Storyboards. I have a remember item struct that contains 5 pieces of information that correspond to the items displayed on the screen. There's also a unique identifier for each item, and it adheres to the Codeable protocol. I have a data source that contains all of my functions for creating, updating, and deleting the items, and it stores them in an array of remember item. The store class is used to encode and decode the array of remember item and save the items to a file that is stored in the app's documents directory, thus giving me persistence between launches. In the resources folder, I have a set of images that are used for each of the 6 different remember item types. Feel free to dig into the code and see how I built this app. We'll not be changing this code much at all. What we want to do is add the code that will allow us to build a widget for those who have upgraded to iOS 14. What we want to do in this project is create a widget that will share my primary reminder as a widget, so I can have it available on my home screen as a quick glance. Each time I choose a different primary remembered item, the widget will refresh. This is what's called a static configuration for our widget. There will be no need to schedule any updates, as the updates will happen on demand when we change our primary item. So in order to do that, we're going to have to create a location where we can share data between our app and our yet-to-be-created widget extension. For this, we create an AppGroup, and we'll use a shared user defaults to store the JSON information. Now, in order to be able to create an AppGroup, you have to have a developer account because it will be needed to create a signing certificate. We want to add a new group using our bundle ID. So to move forward with this, you're going to have to change the team and bundle identifier here to match your own account. Select Signing and Capabilities. Tap on the plus button, then double-click on App Groups to create the App Group section. Once you've done that, copy the bundle ID, Then tap on the plus button beside the app groups, and after the group, paste in your bundle ID. Tap the refresh button until the red turns white, and then do the same for the release section. Once the release section disappears, the app group looks like this, and you're ready to begin. Now, every time we tap on our Make Primary button, we want to store the encoded object in user defaults. We can't use the standard user defaults because that's only available to the app target, and it won't be available to our widget extension. Also, since the widget is only available on iOS 14 and higher, and our target is iOS 12, we'll have to make sure that we check the availability of iOS 14 for anything that we do with respect to creating the widget that uses an iOS 14 capability. I'm going to take advantage of that by using the new app storage property wrapper to save our object, since we'll only be doing this if the user is running iOS 14. So where do we do this? Let's create a new file called primary item. Change the import to SwiftUI and add another one for import WidgetKit. Create a struct called primary item. Now we're going to be using an iOS 14 property wrapper, so we need to preface it to check for iOS 14 or higher availability. With that done, we can create an app storage property using the key store arguments. For the key, we'll use remember item, and for the store, we'll use user defaults with the suite name argument, and that argument will be our bundle identifier with the group prefix. We'll create the variable as primary item as data, with data as an initializer. Create another property that will be our primary remember item. Next, create a function called storeItem that will encode the data of our codable remember item and store it in our remember item key for our shared user defaults. Now, since the remember item object is codable, we can use JSON encoder to try to encode the data. And if successful, store it in the primary data variable and thus in user defaults. I also need to tell our widget to reload the data once it's stored. So following that last line, add a call to the shared widget center using the reload all timelines method. And one more thing. During testing, I sometimes like to make sure that we are actually saving. So I want to print that encoded object to the console. I have to convert it to a string. So we can do that using the string decoding using a UTF-8 decoder. If I return now to our remember items data source file, I can create a new function called savePrimary that has a remember item as a parameter. Then, using the ifAvailable check for iOS 14 or later, I can create a new instance of the primary item, passing in the item, and then call the storeItem function on it to save it to the shared user defaults. The way I've structured the code is that in this app, every time we return from the details screen, I call the update function in case there were edits or a primary button change. If the primary button has changed, we want to store that information in our shared user defaults. So, if item.isPrimary, we can save primary using item. Let's run this a couple of times, changing the primary item and updating the item to see if the JSON string is printed in the console. I see that it is, so I know now that we have a successful save, and it's time to move on to create our widget. We are now ready to create our widget extension. To create a new extension, go to File, New, select Target, and then select Widget Extension and click on Next. There's a checkbox there that allows you to include configuration intent. You should make sure that it is unchecked because in this tutorial we're going to cover static configurations and we don't want to give an option for users to edit the widget. We'll need to give the widget a name, so I'll call it Remember It Widget. At the next screen, click on Activate, and so now we are in our widget target. Before we inspect the widget, we'll want to make sure that this target is also a member of our app group. So select the target and tap on the Capabilities button and add app groups. Then make sure you select the same group as the one you did for your app target. We now have a new Remember It widget folder with its own set of assets, info.plist, and the Remember It widget Swift file. This file has a lot of boilerplate code in it, and we even get to see a preview of the widget using that boilerplate code. The important thing to know is that the data of your widget will be provided through a timeline entry, which can be updated based on your app's use case. For example, you may have a news app that you want to refresh on a regular basis. In the boilerplate code, you see that it generates a timeline consisting of 5 entries, an hour apart, starting at the current date. In our case, however, we won't be using this feature as we'll be pushing our data from the app, so we won't have any need to change our date. So let's get started. To make this more understandable, let's rename the simple entry struct to Remember It entry. I'm also going to move it up to the top of the file. Date is required for every timeline entry, but we're going to change that in just a second. I'm also going to need a Remember item. So when I try to create the instance of Remember item, it's not available in code completion. And this is because we're in a different target. We'll need to go to the Remember item file and open up the inspector and the file inspector and check off the widget extension target. At the same time, we're going to want to be able to share the icon resources, so open the resources folder and select icons.xc assets and add the widget target here too. Back in the Remember It widget file, we can now specify Remember item as a Remember item object. At the same time, I mentioned that we will not be using the timeline to make requests to get data, so we can set the date to the current date and leave it like that. This creates some errors in the other functions, so let's fix those. For our placeholder function, it requires a Remember It entry object so that it can have some sample data to display a widget placeholder for our gallery. I'll just add some sample values so that I can design my widget with what might be an item from my app. With that item created, we can remove the date property as we've assigned it already in our struct, and we can add our Remember item argument. Finally, we must add return. To get the snapshot, we need to be able to access our user default's Remember items key value. So I'll return to the primary item and copy the app storage initializer. I'll return now and paste that to the top of our timeline provider struct. Note that this time we don't need to specify the availability of iOS 14 because this entire target is only available if iOS 14. Next, in the getSnapshot function, we can retrieve and decode the data stored in our primary item data variable and use it to create our entry. We'll use a guard statement and try using JSON decoder to decode the data as a Remember item object, getting the data from the primary item data app storage variable. If successful, we can remove the date parameter argument and add in our Remember item. The getTimeline method is used to update your widget on a schedule. And if you're going to be polling, so to speak, to retrieve updates on a schedule, you'd create a new date after the last polling time and assign that to the date property of the entry like we were doing here. Before I update this code though, let me open the definition for timeline and see that the initializer requires an array of entry type and timeline reload policy. If I go to the documentation for timeline reload policy, I have three choices. We could basically choose any one of these because our widget's not going to be requesting any information. But it seems that never would be the best choice here. Let's copy the code from the get snapshot and delete all but the last two lines of our getTimeline code and replace it with that copied data. Remember, timeline requires an array of entries, so we can just use our single entry in an array, and for the policy, I'll use never. The final error is our preview provider. It's displaying a widget entry view that requires a remember it entry that also requires a remember item argument. Let's use the same sample data that we created for the placeholder, and we'll make it a static property, and then update the remember it entry by removing the date and adding in the remember item. All we have to do now is use our SwiftUI skills to design our widget. This is the small widget, and we'll get to the other ones later, but let's walk before we run. The body of our widget will no longer be this text view. We want it to look something like our collection view cell. The thing is, you can't use UIKit. You need to use SwiftUI. So if you haven't dived into SwiftUI yet, now's the time. Just follow along with me here if you haven't, and start looking for SwiftUI resources to level up your skills. First, create an H stack containing the entries remember item icon and title. Start with the image for our icon. We can make it resizable, and we'll set the frame to 50 by 50 and add a foreground color of red. The title is a text view of the entries remember item.title, and we'll try a heading font. Let me just change the text size here in Xcode to make it a little more readable. I'm going to embed the H stack in a V stack, and I'll set the alignment to leading. Next, I'll add the remaining detail text views below, with detail 1 being a title font, and detail 2 a body font. Now I'll add a spacer to the bottom to push the content up to the top. It's starting to look pretty good, but let's add a little padding all around, a padding of 5. Now you may have to work with the layout a bit more if you have a lot of text. It may not wrap properly. For me, the priority is that the first detail field is going to be able to wrap. So I'll set the layout priority here to 1, so that if it has a choice for wrapping text, it'll do it on this text view and just truncate the second one if necessary to fit the space. It's time to test. With the widget target selected, we can build and run. You'll see our rental SUV is displayed as that small widget on our home screen. When I tap on the widget, the app launches. I'm going to make the room number my primary, and I'm now going to return to the home screen. The widget has automatically updated. Let me try a couple more. All is good. Now let's work on different sizes. So far we've been working entirely with the small size widget that takes up a 2x2 grid on the home screen. There are two other sizes, one that takes up a 4x2 grid and a large 4x4. If you swipe to the left of your home screen, you get to the iPhone widget screen. Scroll to the bottom and tap on Edit, then tap on the plus button at the top. You'll see your I Remember app in the list, so tap on it, and you'll see the representation of your three widget sizes. There's lots of wasted space on the second and third items, and we'll work on the medium size, the 4x2 widget, and I'll leave it up to you to do the same for the 4x4. Also note that the title and description for this gallery is not descriptive of this widget. I want to add the medium-sized widget to my home screen, so all I have to do is tap on it and drag out of here onto my home screen, then tap Done. It seems cut off at the bottom, but this is just a temporary glitch. If I just move to another screen and back again, it refreshes properly. Let's return to Xcode now then and see how we can design that 4x2 to use up more space. First, let's update that display name and description on the widget. Now we only want to support the small and medium widgets, so to exclude the large one, we need to call the supported families method in our widget. So just after the description, add the supported families method, and we'll see that it expects an argument of an array of widget family. We'll just add .systemSmall and .systemMedium. Now, unfortunately, the duplicate preview button does not appear to be activated to easily create different sized widget previews. Perhaps this will change once the new Xcode is released. I'm working on beta 6 while creating this video. Still, we can do this in code. I'll just embed this existing preview in a group, then I'll duplicate it and change the family to SystemMedium. Refreshing now, the preview now shows both widgets. The first thing I'm going to do is copy the contents of our widget entry view and create a new view, and I'll call it small widget, and paste in the copied code. I'll duplicate this, and I'll rename this one medium widget. Now I can return to the widget entry view, and I'll add a new environment variable for the key widget family, and I'll call it family. With that in place now then, I can use an if-else statement to present the correct widget. So if family equals system small, I'll present the small widget. Else, I'll present the medium widget. Of course, we've got the same widget layout for both, so let's modify the medium one to utilize that extra width. I'm going to embed the VStack in an HStack, and then I can remove the image out and put it as the first entry. I'll change the size of our image to 125 by 125. I'll no longer need this HStack in this VStack. Let me also change the font for the title to title and detail one to large title. Now I'm going to embed this HStack in its own VStack and set the alignment to leading. I can now move the detail to and the spacer out of the other VStack into this one. I'll remove the padding from the old HStack and add a default padding to the new parent VStack. And instead of using priority 1 here, I'm going to set it to fixed size, horizontal false, and vertical true to get my word wrap. I'm not spending a lot of time on this view, and as you get more experience laying out views in SwiftUI, I'm sure you'll be able to find a layout that will meet your needs. Let's test this now. We can see that both our small and medium widgets are updated as expected. I can tap on either of the widgets to open the app and select another primary item. When I return to the home screen, I see that both of the widgets have been updated. We are done. I hope that you'll be able to start adding widgets to your projects now. I have lots of other videos available and in the queue as well, so please check out the rest of my channel. You can also visit my website to see the apps that I have available on the App Store, and visit my GitHub page to see what I have available as public repositories. If you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And ring the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I'm most active on Twitter, so please follow me there as well to find out what else I'm up to. Thanks for watching.